I would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining us during our weekly hybrid MLS breakfast meetings. My name is Lucy Morales, and I am your June program chair. Okay, a little about me. My name is Lucy Morales with Century 21 Village Realty. I am a member of the Education and the MLS committees. It has been a pleasure to be your June program chair. I would encourage you to join a committee, be part of your association, and make a difference. At the beginning, I was too nervous and I didn't think I could speak in front of you, but here I am. It's my pleasure to welcome from CRMLS Chief Relationship Officer, Sarah Trent Miranda. Let's give her a hand.
Thank you for that. All right, let me get myself set up here. Good morning. It's so nice to see all of you. I am so grateful for the opportunity to be here today and allowing us to come in and talk to you a little bit about what's going on. Hopefully by now you've all heard of the NAR lawsuit and settlement. So we'll be kind of going over some things, reviewing a little bit of what happened and also some of the changes that we have made on the MLS level. We know who I am. Thank you for that lovely intro, by the way. Appreciate all of that. So today we're going to be discussing 4 different topics. So we're going to be covering the summary of the NAR proposed settlement and important dates for y'all to remember. We're also going to be going over the preliminary approval of the NAR MLS policy changes. And we're going to be going over changes approved by the CRMLS Board of Directors and some top questions that we are receiving. So typically, I will take questions through the presentation, but we're on a pretty tight timeline. So if you could write your questions down, hold your questions to the end, I'll probably answer a lot of them as I go through the presentation. And obviously some of the top questions that we're receiving might be one of the ones that you have. I know a lot of you have likely heard this information by now, so my goal today is to provide you with some background and how we got to where we're at today and address some of the concerns I think that we're hearing at the MLS level specifically. The most important takeaway of today is going to be education. You guys are going to be hearing a lot from your association. You're going to be hearing a lot from us. You're going to be hearing a lot from the state. It's just going to be one of those transitions where you're going to have to make sure that you're reading everything that comes your way and keeping educated and doing training on some of the new forms and things that are going to be coming down the pipeline. So I'm going to just start off a little bit talking about kind of how we got to where we're at today. This is a famous quote by Wayne Gretzky, emphasizing the importance of anticipation and forward thinking. Our CEO, Art Carter, who I'm sure most of you all know, he's a firm believer in contingency planning. And since I've been a part of CRMLS, this is something our board has done continually. It's just part of how we strategize every year. Our board of directors, our staff, we are constantly trying to look ahead and skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been. And so you're going to hear us talking a little bit about, or hear me talking a little bit about what we've done to scenario plan for what has come from the lawsuits. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. So I don't want to spend too much time going over the past, but I think it's good to understand kind of how we got to where we're at today. So this has been going on for the last 5 to 6 years. This isn't something new. And also keep in mind that NAR has defended compensation lawsuits for decades. So this has been something that people have tried to fight for a very, very long time. So really, I think it was just a matter of time before we got to where we're at today. And unfortunately, this is the first time that I've seen anything like this in the industry. You heard in my bio, I've been licensed for over 20 years. I'm a 2nd generation realtor. I've been in your shoes. So I understand that, this is a big change and, I've never seen anything like this before. So those of you who've been around a long time, this is definitely something different than what we have seen in the past. Not going to dive into each one of these, but just a quick little kind of history lesson. I want to point out a couple of moments on this timeline that we'll kind of touch on a little bit more later in the presentation. But on August 2019, so 5 years ago almost, Morrell versus NAR, that case opened. And October 2019, you had the Sitzer-Burnett antitrust case that opened. So you had those two cases that opened in 2019. The major difference between these two cases is that Sitzer-Burnett was assigned to an attorney or to a federal judge who's known to be very, very fast. So when that occurred, we knew that that was likely going to be the first case to go to trial. And sure enough, that went to trial in October of 2023. And the 8-person jury trial deliberated for about 2.5 hours, which is a very short amount of time, before issuing its unanimous verdict and ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and awarded damages of nearly $1.8 billion. So I know a question that I get a lot and our entire staff gets a lot is why? Why did NAR settle? Are you guys, are you some of you kind of still wondering what the heck happened there? So I think it's important to understand that in an antitrust case, they'd treble the damages. So they would have been liable for $5.4 billion, not the 1.8. So these remaining defendants, it was NAR, and you had Keller Williams and Home Services of America still on the hook for $5.4 billion. This is a huge amount of money. And considering the loss and another lawsuit coming down the pipeline, you had 27 plus copycat lawsuits that were filed. And NAR really looked at the burden on the brokerage community and the real estate community as a whole, and the different defendants who were still on the hook, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that were still out there for attorney's fees and all of the things that come along with that. So they really did the right thing in going ahead and settling this for all the independent realtors across the country and the associations, and also the majority of the brokerages out there. So that's kind of where we got to where we're at. I think it's important to kind of just reflect a little bit on how we got to where we're at. So here are some important dates regarding the proposed settlement. That brings us to March 15th of this year. And that's where NAR agreed to settle the lawsuits regarding commissions. And NAR agreed to a $419 million settlement. So pennies on the dollar when you look at 5.4 billion versus what they settled for. And again, this covers over 100 million realtor members, state, local realtor organizations. So the settlement did not include the top 90 brokerages in the country. I'm not sure if any of you had heard about that, who had over 2 billion in sales for a certain time period. And so they were required to negotiate a separate settlement, which has occurred. So April 23rd, the federal court provided preliminary approval on NAR MLS policy changes. So this means that preliminary approval was put in place, and there will be a final hearing in November of this year. So this should all be said and done and settled in its entirety in November. But this approval on April 23rd started the clock and triggered a bunch of dates that matter in regards to the settlement agreement and some of the things that we're going to cover today that were put in place. So August 13th is probably, if you're going to remember anything today, August 13th is the day that CRMLS will remove compensation fields from the MLS. So please make note of that and be on the lookout for information that we have coming out about that. Fields will remain in the MLS for historical purposes. So on all closed listings, but it will be removed from the listing input and on existing listings for all property types beginning on August 13th. One question that I've gotten a lot is what happens if I have a listing, an active listing, and August 13th hits? CAR has been working since December on a lot of forms. I know that they've, I think, 71 between new forms and changes that have been made. So again, education, the forms are changing. I can't imagine how you guys are feeling. I know how I would feel being in your shoes. So make sure you're getting yourselves familiarized with these new forms. I believe there's a new form that will help with that transitional time. So if you have a listing, you'll be able to use a form that CAR is providing to be able to go ahead and transition that to this new format. Again, this is going to be a transitional time frame. So be patient with yourselves, be patient with everybody, be patient with each other. I think that's also something that as fellow professionals, you guys are going to have to really be good communicators and hopefully be kind to each other through this transition. So changes to our NAR MLS policy. So our board has approved these changes, and this will bring us into compliance with the updated NAR policy. So this is the exact term from the settlement agreement. I'm going to go ahead and read this one, and then I'll show you the rule that we have put in place, but I'm not going to read the whole rule. I'll let you guys go to crmls.org to do that. But the first one is the NAR MLS, new MLS rule that requires buyer's agents to enter into a written agreement before the buyer tours or shows the property. I think this is going to be probably the most impactful of all the changes. So I'm sure you guys have already heard about this, but again, it has to be a specific fee to be paid to the buyer agent. The fee has to be ascertainable, no games. So there's no condition, there's no sharing, there's no, it's a straight agreement between buyer's agent and the buyer. And the buyer broker may not receive more compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate in the agreement with the buyer. This is straight from the settlement agreement. And then this is our new rule 9.1 regarding showings. So it pretty much, please take a picture, and I'll be happy to share these slides with you too. But this is the exact rule. So pretty much expands on those 3 points to make sure that you guys are following this. We're still in the process of finalizing compliance measures. So our board of directors went ahead and got these rules established, but as far as enforcing the rules and finding structures around violation of these rules, that's all being worked on. We actually have a rules committee meeting that starts today at 10 o'clock. So our teams will be working on that. I'm trying to hold questions at the end, but is that okay? All right. All right, so the next one is the new MLS rule that prohibits listing brokers and sellers from making offers of compensation on the MLS to buyer brokers, and then also disclosing the MLS listing broker compensation or total broker compensation on the MLS. So next we're going to discuss the no offers of compensation on the MLS, but this is the exact term of the settlement agreement. And so without reading this, I'm just going to say, don't try and share what a commission is on the MLS. Just don't do it. No discussions of compensation, period. We've heard some really creative ways that people are thinking that they're going to be able to display this information. The last 3 digits of the list price, right? So 750, 300 for 3%, or 750, 250. We'll see it, we'll find it, you will get caught. Uploading any kind of documents that have any kind of commission amount. Pictures, we've heard, I don't know, I've heard weird things, people trying to carve numbers into grass on the lawn, all kinds of weird stuff. So just, try to embrace this new way. I know change is hard, but you're going to be all right. You're going to get through this. But yeah, don't do it. We'll find it. And we will do everything we can because we agreed to the settlement. And so this ensures our coverage and the association's coverage. So we have to make sure that this remains and hopefully avoids future litigation. So this is definitely in the best interest of the future. And as an MLS, we have to do these practice changes. So this is expected, and hopefully we'll be protected moving forward. And the next one is the agreeing not to facilitate or support any non-MLS mechanism, including sending listings to internet aggregators. So for listing brokers or sellers to make offers of compensation. So brokers will be allowed to display compensation on their own listings, but for your broker specific listings only. And we cannot and will not provide any any feed, any data to a site that would display sharing of compensation. So we've also heard of some creative companies that the DOJ has already gone after who are trying to put together a site for people to be able to display commission. So, and this also includes going out to any of the portals, right? So Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com. So that will not be going out to any of these websites. And this is the actual rule. So I'll let you guys, I know I see some pictures being taken, but this is the new rule 19.2.21, no display of offers of compensation. And just a side note, this is also from the settlement agreement. Rules shall not prevent offers of compensation to buyer brokers off the MLS. So offers of compensation will not be on the MLS anymore. However, broker to broker compensation can still be negotiated off the MLS, just like it is today. And also, rules shall not prevent sellers from offering concessions on the MLS, so long as such concessions are not limited to or conditioned on the retention of payment to a cooperating broker or buyer broker. So this is kind of where we're going to lead to talking a little bit about the the concessions fields that we've added. And there's going to be a lot of ways for you to be able to still do some of these actions. So I'm going to do that probably a couple times, right? Got to get away from it. Concessions have been tracked in our system for a really long time when you are inputting a sale. So we'll dive into this a little bit deeper in a couple slides. So let's touch on the changes that are approved by our board of directors also. May 29th, we went ahead and rolled out our new concessions in price fields. We're calling it the CIP fields. So these new optional fields, they're not required, are going to be, and I'm going to show you guys a screenshot as well if you haven't seen it, but you have concessions in price, which it'll be a text box for numerical input only. And then you have the type, right? A percentage or a dollar amount. And if you complete those two, then you will not be able to check the yes, no box for seller considering concessions. So it's either you input a number and the type of price type, or you will check a box that says yes, no, and that will automatically populate a phrase, a seller may consider a buyer concession if made in an offer. So I look at this as a way for the seller and the listing agent to be able to communicate to a buyer and to a buyer's agent to say, yes, we are willing to consider concessions. And that could be a multitude of different things. And we'll touch on that in a little bit as well, right? Sometimes you have a loan buy down, or that the roof needs to be repaired and they're automatically going to offer a credit for a roof, or any kind of closing costs that the seller already is willing and knows that they're going to negotiate, right? Nothing's firm until you get it into the offer, which is another important thing too. You got to make sure you get everything into your offer. So again, I think this is a way to communicate the willingness of the seller to consider this. And so just kind of some fun facts here, concessions in CRMLS closed listings. So in 2023, nearly 40% of closed listings included some form of concessions. So we went ahead and looked at that to see how much you guys are actually using those concession fields when you're closing out the deal. 15% of the 40% of closed residential listings, excuse me, included some form of advertisement of concessions being offered in the private remarks. So you're also leveraging the private remarks, not to say sellers willing to pay a certain commission amount, but that there are concessions being offered. So that's being communicated a couple of different ways in the system. And the concessions on closed listings. So really, I think the most interesting number here, I mean, you see, obviously 2019, you have 42% of closed residential listings that included concessions. And then in 2021, it goes down to 25%. Any ideas on why it went down in 2021? Hot market. Things were flying off the shelf. Sellers probably weren't going to pay closing costs perhaps like they would in a little bit of a slower market. So you can kind of see how it fluctuated based on market conditions, but again, still being used. So here's an example of what it looks like in Matrix, the new CIP field. So you can see here that you have, again, the number and the price type. And again, these are optional. This is not required for you to input your listing. And then you have the seller consider concessions. And that when you click yes, it will automatically populate that phrase again. So again, an optional way for you to be able to communicate that to the buyer and the buyer's agent. And so I think that CAR is on version 15 of the new RLA. I know this is a little bit of an older, but I'm pretty sure that this is pretty close to what it's going to look like. We rolled out the new concessions price and field early because CAR is going to be releasing the new and revised forms actually next week on the 25th. So as you can see here, there's a lot of red on the back image. I mean, you can kind of see all the red back there, and those are all changes and new information. So I would definitely sign myself up for a class, talk to your broker, make sure you're following their instructions on how they want you to fill out this form. We are very much in favor of the concessions option. We feel it's the least risky. The form does still offer an option for the seller to offer compensation, but again, I'm not your attorney. I'm not going to be your broker, but I would definitely educate yourself and make sure that you are following instruction based on what your brokerage wants you to do. But I do feel that the concessions piece of it provides an opportunity for the seller to say, yep, send me the offer. I'm willing to consider concessions and negotiate it through the contract versus offering it out through the listing. Let's see here. I know there were a couple other things I wanted to. Nope, I think I covered everything there. Oh, I did want to mention too, just for us as an MLS, we have really been doubling down on cooperation versus compensation, right? And so doing everything we can to provide you with the tools and the information that you need to be able to cooperate together. And so we're going to continue doing that and making sure that we are providing you with everything that you need to be able to do your business and get what you need from the MLS. And so just a sneak peek here with closed listing concession. So this is on the, when you go to actually report the property is closed. So you're able to go in right now and your fields are very limited. So we're going to be expanding on those fields and adding some information. So it is required and just like it is today, but we will be putting a drop down that'll have some separate fields. So you'll be able to put an amount and then list what it's for. So you can see here, we're adding closing costs, property improvements, financing costs, buyer broker fee, and other. So this will be a way for us to be able to go ahead and track what is being paid. And this is really important. So when you're going in to do a CMA or you're an appraiser, you're going in to look at what the seller paid in concessions, which again, encompasses several different things. They'll be able to say, oh, okay, this was because of physical repairs or actual fee that was being paid. So really important when you're doing your valuation. So we want to make sure that we retain this information and provide that to you. These are important facts, that should be maintained for accuracy. The total will be automatically calculated for you. There will be an additional text field, there will be a text field just like there is today, which allows you to elaborate a little further on anything. This will not be provided in our IDX going out. This is private information. And we will have our rules committee working on the citation policy and how this will also be enforced. So that is coming. More information on that soon. All right. And some top questions that we're getting. So hopefully I've answered some of your questions, haven't confused you even more. But this is one of the questions that we get. Is this the end of real estate as we know it? Do you guys think it's the end of real estate? Yes and no. Honestly, I think that the way we know it today, things are going to change. But is it the end of real estate and the end of realtors and the end of it? No, absolutely not. There's a tremendous value that you all bring to your clients. And, you know, I think that one of the things that you're going to have to do is really clearly articulate your value proposition. And, you know, it's a shift. It's a shift, but I think you all are going to be able to pivot and do it. I'm actually really excited about a product that we have invested in and also will be rolling out hopefully later this year. And it will help you do that with the value proposition and going through everything that you do, right? And I know there's been like realtor.com's doing a campaign right now on all of the things that you do, and you're starting to see a lot more of this. The product is called Raise, RAYSE. And they did a survey. I think this is so interesting. They did a survey for 500 buyers who recently bought a home within the last 6 months. And they asked, how many hours do you think your buyer's agent, spent on the transaction? And their answer was 10 to 15 hours total. Yeah. And so, right, that's not true, right? And so the actual amount, the average, and sometimes I think it's probably more, is around 90 hours that you're spending with a buyer on a transaction. So, you know, it's one of those things that you just have to make sure that you are letting the buyer know all the 150 things that you're going to do to get them to the finish line. Will the MLS track sellers' payments to buyer brokers? So yes, we will. I showed you that screen where you'll be able to put the concessions and go ahead and list that price out. So yes, we feel that's an important element, especially when you're doing your valuations. Open houses. So, you know, the settlement is silent on the topic of open houses. I know CAR has touched on this a little bit. Our position on this is that a seller hires an agent to sell the property and show it to any viable buyer. So an open house, you know, it's the fiduciary responsibility of the listing agent to go ahead and open that house and show it to anyone who's interested. So I know that there's forms. I know that there's a lot of information floating around out there. So again, talk to your broker on how you want to handle that. But our position on it is really nothing's changed. VA loans. Recently, VA announced a short-term policy change. Have you guys heard about that? Because I know that was a really big, a lot of people were really frustrated because VA loans, you can't pay any fees, any broker fees. So recently the VA announced a short-term policy change that allows VA buyers to pay for certain buyer broker fees when purchasing a home. And that begins on August 10th. So good news there. And I think we'll start to see other changes occurring within the lending world just to adapt to this new way. And then will there be new updated CAR forms? I already covered that. So yes, a lot. So make sure that you are making this the summer of education. We can just put it out there and get you guys trained up on that. And I think that's it for me on my slides, but I know we had a couple questions. Oh, important dates, obviously the new fields, and then August 13th. So you guys all have that one. And then also this is our CRMLS resources page. So you can scan the QR code, or if you just go to crmls.org, we are constantly updating this information. So Ed and Art have done a few videos, our CEO and general counsel. So make sure that you go check that out, kind of hear what they've had to say. You can kind of get a little history of how we've been communicating this out to everybody for the last several months. So a lot of good information there. All right. Questions? Clear as mud?
Please come up to the microphone, the center microphone, if you have any questions.
I think I saw one online too, Belen, if you, wow.
No.
Oh, wait, I think the chat had some questions, so.
Yes, there's a question.
Okay, do you want to handle those? Do you want to read them or do you want me to? Oh, hi.
Hi there. The online question is why this lawsuit came about, what caused it?
Why the lawsuit came
I guess
about?
the what the plaintiffs were really suing for, I guess is what.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, it was just that sellers were overpaying. They felt that they were overpaying, and same on the buy side. So there's still some buyer compensation lawsuits that are floating around out there. So yeah, they felt that they were overpaying for fees.
Okay. And I have a quick question. So
Yeah.
in the concession part, are you in the concession section of the MLS going forward?
Uh-huh.
So could there be any mention of brokerage fees in the concession part?
No,
Okay.
no mentioning of commissions. Or
Commissions.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So it would just basically be, yes, the seller's willing to consider concessions.
Right.
But as far as an exact number of a commission or the seller willing to pay, that has to be eliminated.
Okay. So it cannot be listed, but privately they could speak about what the concessions could be. and
100%.
That could possibly be the.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to give the example, and everyone operates differently. But for me, when I was out there selling and I had an offer and I was going to present it to a listing agent and I got the offer from my buyer, I always reached out to that listing agent every time. I don't ever think I sent a blind offer. So I think those days of just sending an offer and, crossing your fingers are long gone. I think calling the listing agent, having the conversation, is there any information I should be aware of? Is the seller willing to, pay concessions? And I feel like that's where it would be a natural place for that conversation to probably occur, but it cannot be listed in the MLS anywhere.
Okay. And I know that there's a lot of classes that's gone over some of the forms that are coming.
Yes.
Is there one central place that we can find a list of the new forms?
That's a great question. I know CAR.org
Has the list.
or CAR. Yeah. Is it .org? So yeah. So through your CAR membership, you should be able to go in and see a list of that. I think that they put, this is Amy Ulloa Zuniga, by the way. She's our director of broker resources. I love her. She's so great. But yeah, so any brokers, but Amy's wonderful and actually used to work with CAR. And so very knowledgeable. That's why I always, is it there?
Yes. So on car.org, if you click on, once you're logged in, you can click on Learn and Thrive. There's a section dedicated to forms. The forms that are red line, like the listing agreement, is going to be their red line with the changes. And on that same page, there's another PDF form that lists every single new form and every form that's been edited. And that's going to be on the website now. And those forms will be available in your zip form in about a week.
Yeah, the 25th, everything will shift over.
And I know you have one more question in the chat that had to do with, is this rule set only applying to residential, or does it also apply to commercial properties?
Great question. Yeah, no, this is all property types. So this is across the board. Good question. Yes. Yep. I know that's not talked about, right? The main focus has been residential, but yeah, it's across the board. Hi. Yeah, I think so because of our attendees on Zoom.
I had a question about the commission. We can announce commissions through emails. I can put on my website, right, to let people know that there's a buyer's commission. Come bring your buyers, and we are offering a commission. We can't post it on the MLS. However, can I create a website that everybody could, or a platform that everyone could post their own commissions?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. So
they
we
are
can do
trying,
one by one, but
if you're a broker, you can display it on your own listings only.
Okay.
On your own website.
So if I was Zillow, then I couldn't place a part where agents can upload.
No, in fact, that is one thing that we are, per the settlement agreement, will not be feeding any commission amounts, nor are they allowed to display any commission amounts. So the settlement agreement kind of encompasses all of that activity. So for Zillow or any of the large portals or any website. So there's been a few companies who've tried to set up websites.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I get where you're thinking, but yeah, they want it decoupled. They do not want it advertised.
But you can advertise email by email.
But for your,
my own website.
I mean,
okay.
I would say, yeah, I mean, I'd just be very careful with
Okay.
what you do because, it's just, they are really wanting you to adapt to this new consumer centric model and decouple the commission from the seller paying the buyer agent.
Got it. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that helps. I know. Change.
And Any more questions? We have a couple of, sorry, I've been asked to be in the center, so
Are
our
you the-
Zoom audience can see us. I have another question from online. So could the broker concessions be written up in the offer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That, in fact, that is where you want it to go. So I know no one here wants to work for free. So make sure, I think we've heard Art talk about this. I've talked about it a lot with our support team and education team. I'm very concerned that there will be an agent who doesn't do that, right? And does not write your commission amount into the offer and get that all negotiated. So make sure you are doing that if that's the direction that you want to go. Yeah.
Okay. And the other question
I'll get
is,
to that.
since inputting the concessions is kind of a voluntary act,
Yes.
how are you guys tracking it to make sure that that's been done properly?
Yeah, it's not something that we're tracking and it is optional. And again, we are looking at this as a way for the seller and the listing agent to communicate that they're willing to take a look at whatever the concession requests might be. So it's not required. But on the closing, right, we showed the concessions on the closing side, that is a required field. So we do require for you to list out any concessions that were paid on the closing side. So that would be the tracking piece.
Okay. And last question on
Sure.
line at
No,
least is
that's why I'm here.
on the MLS listing, could agents add their own website link? And then I'm guessing the question is that link would then have
Yes.
some
Yeah.
sort of talk about commissions.
Yeah. Yeah. No. They in the private remarks, they don't allow any kind of
Links
websites
to
or
be-
links or anything, just like
be
today.
included. Okay.
Yeah, just like today. So you guys love telling on each other. So reporting violations will be the way that we will continue to monitor that. It's what? Oh, yeah. It's oh, okay. But it's true. So a lot of people are like, oh, what kind of technology do you have in place to when there's a photo that has a sign or something that's wrong? We don't even need that. We got you guys telling on each other. So same thing will remain. And I know, did you have a question?
Yes.
Do you mind?
How about the owner? If the owner put the listing on the, like, something like a Facebook?
If the owner puts
Yeah.
something out there?
Does it,
Ooh, that's a,
indicate about the NAR or CR?
yeah, that's a really good question.
For those of you who couldn't hear online, the question is if the owner themselves put broker commission fees online themselves, such as Zillow, what would happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that I don't think that we would be able to monitor if a seller went and posted something on their personal website that, hey, I'm willing to pay a certain fee to anyone who brings a buyer. That's a great question. I haven't gotten that one. You're the winner. I don't have a prize, but I'll definitely, have you heard anything on that, Amy?
All right. So if the settlement is specific to realtors,
Right.
right? So if a seller were to offer, they're not part of that
Yeah.
settlement. And so there's no tracking mechanism for it. Now, what we do, and I think Ed has talked about it, I think at some point, if they see like a pop-up of for sale by owners that do that, then the DOJ is going to come in and start checking into
Regulating.
that and regulating that as well. Only because what we're seeing right now is as websites are popping up or, trying to scrape the data and pull it before the August timeframe, they're already coming in and regulating them. So they are keeping an eye on it.
Yep. Yeah. So whether or not you'd advise your seller to do that, it could be risky. It could be, setting them up for something in the future. So I think the best way to do this is just to transition and say, put it in your offer. Yep. My seller's willing to negotiate. They're willing to offer concessions and pay fees, get it into your offer. And that's where you specifically would write seller to pay buyer broker X amount. So shifting to that new way of just getting it into the offer process.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Good morning, Vince Venetiano. I don't know if anybody ever been thought about which now a listing agent, they go to the seller and they negotiate on the commission and say, so, okay, I'm put a 5% commission on the listing agreement. And
Yeah, let's
now,
not, let's
now,
remember not to talk commit. We're not just antitrust. We can't talk numbers.
yeah, but okay, we take it off of the number. But
Okay.
apparently, if they put a number there and then now ask the seller to have a concession for the buyer agent, now you will overcharge the seller.
I understand what you're asking. So I think there's going to be a high level of importance with a listing agent educating the seller. It's right. Everyone's talking about the buyer, right? And the buyer's agency, buyer broker agreement and the buyer and how we get, but I think the tricky part here and most important is talking to the seller and saying, hey, things have changed since the last time we did this. Or if it's a first time, if it's a seller selling for the first time, explaining that the way that it was and that we would negotiate a number when we listed the property has changed. That number's just between us. So it's highly likely we're going to get offers from a buyer who's going to request for you to pay a certain amount. And so instead of it happening up front with you and I on the listing, it's going to happen through the offer process. So everything's going to come out the tube the same on the other side. It's just a matter of how do we get it all into the tube and make sure everybody's educated and getting paid for the services that they're providing. So I understand what you're asking. And yeah, you want to make sure that you're, I think, again, educating the seller to understand that that amount is just between the two of you.
Because as far as I remember, it's when you put a number on that listing agreement, you cannot change after the seller assign.
Yeah.
Now you come up with a different number because apparently you have to compensate the buyer. Now you will overcharge the seller.
Yeah, I thank you. And I think that's part of it too, is that most of the deals that I was involved in, the number was never what we agreed upon when we started, right? Because there's things that come up through the transaction. So I think it's not going to be that different from how you're transacting today. I honestly think that you guys, you're going to pivot and be just fine. But again, things happen, right? There's unforeseen things that come through the physical inspection and the buyer's, not able to pay to make sure that those things are operating correctly. And so numbers adjust as you go through the transaction. So yes. I think so, just because they have people on Zoom. I can repeat the question too, if you want. That's okay.
So I just want to clarify, because he did, so mentally I was thinking that I can negotiate with the seller, explain what's going on, and then let's say the seller says, okay, I'm willing to do 4% or 5%.
No numbers.
So no numbers at all?
We
between-
can't talk about numbers.
No, but I'm saying.
Just say a certain percentage.
Okay, a certain percentage. But so what he's saying, I kind of understood what he was saying. So let's say there was a number just between my seller and myself.
Mhm.
If they're willing to compensate
The buyer's
the
agent.
buyer's agent,
Mhm.
should we put that on our listing agreement, or should we just put between what they're willing to compensate me?
You can. I think that's up to you and your broker, if that's how you would like to structure the listing agreement. Again, I think that that's a risky way to go, just considering they're trying to decouple it. And so, again, I would talk to or if you're the broker, I talk to your attorney. I would make sure that you are fully educating yourself on completing that form and what that looks like. The forms will be out. Yes, the question was the forms. Yeah, they come out next week on the 25th. That's the scheduled date from CAR. All right, I think I'm way past my time. Yeah, I'm getting the hook. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to be around if you have questions later. Thank you.
On behalf of the West San Gabriel Valley Realtors, I would like to thank our guest speaker for a very informative presentation. Please accept this small token of appreciation. Please join us next week as the Membership Special Events Committee will be hosting a 4th of July celebration. Yay! Please be here. It's a very important celebration, celebrating our freedom. Thank you, everyone, for joining our meeting today. We will see you next week. Have a wonderful day. The meeting is now adjourned.